Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 8:50 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. And we are now going to be talking with Ashraf Patel. He is a senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Now, more than 24 hours after Lula da Silva was declared Brazil's next president, incumbent Jair Bolsonaro has yet to address his electoral defeat. This raised concerns that the far-right leader could be planning to contest the results. Assalamu alaikum to you, Ashraf. Welcome to the program. And how do you respond to my opening statement?
Salam, Auntie Julie. Hope you all well and hope listeners are well. Yes, thank you. This is a huge story. Brazil is one of the largest economies in the world, and it is in the headwinds of lots of political, economic, and social storms. I would say, yes, this is trending. The election was one of the most closely contested elections in Brazilian history. Over 110 million people voted, and Lula da Silva won by 51 to 49%. So it was a very thin margin, but in terms of numbers and statistics, he won by 2.4 million votes. So that is significant. Yes. And so one can say conclusively he won, but yes, one can see the broader sociology of the country is divided along these two camps that are on opposite sides of so many divides.
So, Ashraf, let's look at Bolsonaro's leadership. I mean, whenever I have, followed his interviews, etc., I couldn't help but wonder if he's not the twin brother to Donald Trump, because his stance on world politics and his own country's politics was really very, very far right indeed. So let's look at what he was all about and how this changes the political landscape of the 215 million Brazilian people, having Lula da Silva now being declared Brazil's next president, keeping in mind that Lula is also very pro-Palestine and pro-Iran.
Yes, I would say it is contested narratives. Firstly, Bolsonaro comes from the ruling classes of Brazil, so he represents what is called the old bloc. You must know that Brazil was under military rule for almost 40 years, from the 1950s. Like South Africa, it is very repressive. The democratic wave only came in the 80s and 90s with the trade union movement and civil society, etc. So Bolsonaro comes from the very rich family that owns a lot of land, that are very privileged, and he has close links with the military, which is still very powerful. And so those combination of factors led to the right-wing wave that is taking place across the world, from India to the US to many parts of the world. And of course, it's not just political. So I would say the politics today are divided. Firstly, ideological is only one component. Economic policy is another. But there are major battles around social policy, around family rights, around workers' rights, around how to deal with the pandemic. And in the middle of this, Auntie Julie, is what is called major social media storms, major disinformation campaigns through Twitter, through social media, etc., of which the right wing has proven to use these tools very effectively, unfortunately. So you take all these elements together, you have a very divided political environment and one that is very, very bad for the country, because people and families are divided, communities are divided. So I would say, at least with Lula, who's promised to be an inclusive president, one can see much more progressive policies emerging from his administration.
Ashraf, Bolsonaro spent months claiming that the Brazilian electoral system was vulnerable to fraud, much like Trump did in the elections which Biden won. So Trump was also, for months on end, claiming that the electoral system was vulnerable, and so has Bolsonaro. That, of course, kind of makes one wonder if he's planning to contest the results. He has now lost, obviously, as the polls has predicted, despite certain people in government suggesting that he is going to concede today. Your thoughts on this situation?
Yes, remember, he's borrowing from the Trump political playbook, essentially whip up emotions through social media and then try and create a mass movement around the election. And hopefully if that gains momentum, then he could pull off a Trump stunt. But I don't think it's possible in this case, purely because the numbers are so clear. Yes, it was very close, but 2.4 million is quite significant victory in margin. But it also means that he needs to reflect on his failed administration, particularly under the COVID administration. Remember, almost 1 million Brazilians died of COVID, and it was one of the most mismanaged countries in the world. He was completely, he didn't believe in COVID. He had no proper programs in place. He had no post-COVID economic recovery plans. And all of this led to his decline in Brazilian society. But I must say, what's interesting about Lula's victory and quite positive for the world is that the major leaders have warmly welcomed him. So, for instance, all the BRICS nations, China, Russia, etc., has warmly welcomed Lula purely because it's a boost for BRICS. But he's also been welcomed by President Biden. Mm-hmm. And that's also important because Bolsonaro was seen as akin to Trump. And I can see Lula playing a more mediative role in the global situation because he's trusted by both the East and the West, both the BRICS bloc and the US under Biden. So this could be a very interesting for global affairs and I would say a very positive move in a very fractured world.
The one thing that struck me as well was that when Bolsonaro's wife went to cast her vote, she was wearing a T-shirt. I don't know if you picked that up. It's been doing the social media rounds as well. She was wearing a T-shirt with the Israeli flag on the T-shirt. And I kind of wonder what sort of message is that sending out? Then also, you've spoken about all of Bolsonaro's failings as far as the governing of Brazil is concerned during his tenure. Was there anything at all that he did that was positive, perhaps, for the economy and the people of Brazil?
Yes. You must remember that Bolsonaro basically is a Trump Jr. So especially on the Middle East politics, he's followed the Trump policies to the T. And therefore, he was very pro-Israel and very anti-Middle East, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestine. Whereas Lula has been a great friend, a very principled friend of the Palestinian struggle. Under the Lula administration, they've warmly welcomed Palestinian and Syrian refugees, for instance. And I can see this continuing. And this position of solidarity with Africa, with Palestine, with many parts of the world, is a very principled position of the left in Latin America and globally. But I must also caution that the Lula administration has won by a narrow margin, which means that the scope for reforms and change is limited, and he would have to tread very carefully. He should not make the mistakes of his when he was president about 8 years ago, if you get involved in one or two, let's say, corruption scandals, the opposition moves in very quick. They create a lot of, it's called lawfare. So lawfare is a kind of strategy where when politicians make mistakes, like in corruption, the judiciary moves in a big way. And this is what happened in Brazil, etc. Now, I think Lula would be much more cautious. He would have to really ensure good governance, but at the same time, he would have to deliver economically, because once there is an economic downturn, this is when populist forces move in. And in a post-COVID world, it's going to be difficult to get economic growth going. So therefore, quite wisely, Lula's strategy is he's saying, I'm the president of all of Brazil. And he's taking a unifying stance because he needs the whole country behind him to get an economic program going. And I think that is his first priority. Hopefully in Latin America, he will get a lot of support from fellow nations. So that is a big plus. And with BRICS, he would also get good support. And I think also with the US and Europe, they are quite positive about it because of his support for progressive policies on climate change and those things. So he is in a good space, but he needs to navigate a very divided country, and hopefully, better charity can be developed to assist him, because Brazil is a beautiful country. I've been there many times. It's like South Africa. It's very lots of inequality, but lots of potential. And I think it can be a good model for the world if they get it right.
Okay, you mentioned something called lawfare. I think we as South Africans should see that it is passed here in South Africa. Hopefully it will stop all the corruption and the rot in our government. But that's just by the way, Ashraf. In terms of, you've indicated challenges as far as Lula's new government is concerned. I'm kind of wondering, and you mentioned this just a little while ago, the strong ties that Bolsonaro enjoys or has with the Brazil's former military regime, which ruled between 64 and 85. Does that kind of bode some sort of caution as far as Lula is concerned? How strong is Bolsonaro's ties with the military, and could that be some sort of a threat at all?
I would say it's an issue, but it's not an overriding issue. Brazilians are matured. I don't think they'll allow counter coups, etc. But it can happen. And therefore, Bolsonaro has to move, Lula has to move quite slowly and cautiously with economic progressive policy. So he cannot go very fast with, let's say, redistribution of wealth or land reform. He would have to take it in stages, because the power structures are the industrial, the financial, the military, and the land farm-owning classes. And people constitute the ruling classes in Brazil. And they're very powerful, and they have the military behind them. So he would have to take a democratic public movement. He would have to take the people with him at every stage of his government in the next few years. He would have to be very cautious. He cannot allow any scandals to come, because the minute there's a scandal, the judiciary will move in, etc. So he is in a tight spot, but I think he has earned the admiration of a lot of Brazilians and the world. And it is a good news story in a world that's so divided and fractured after the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine, etc. I think the world is looking for more leaders that can unify their countries and societies and play a positive developmental role on the global stage. And I think it's very positive that he's got BRICS behind him, but he's also got really good welcoming notes from the US and the EU. So it suggests that the likes of Lula is well received globally, and hopefully that momentum can carry through. And hopefully South Africa can also learn from Lula. We need, we're going through lots of race relations issue, unemployment, poverty, and the Lula government and his track record can show us the way.
As long as we introduce lawfare into our country, that's all I'm concerned about at this time. Ashraf, thank you indeed for talking to us. Of course, we wait with bated breath to today. Obviously, that's when Bolsonaro is going to hopefully concede to the election results and hand over to Lula. And I need to have a chat with you hopefully next week, Monday, or next week when I come back on air regarding Rishi Sunak's role
Yes,
in British politics. I can't wait to
yes.
start unpacking that. So I look forward to it. Please do make yourself available for that discussion. Thank you for being with us on
Inshallah,
the show this morning.
keep up the good work, inshallah.
Shukran very much, and thank you so very much for your insights into this matter, and we will talk again sometime soon. That was Ashraf Patel, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. It is exactly 9:06. News and views on Salam Media, and of course, Zai Jadwat is standing by with the news bulletin of the morning.